St. Mary's Church had stood on the outskirts of Millfield for over a century, a once grand structure now fallen into disrepair. The townsfolk spoke of strange occurrences and whispered tales of ghostly apparitions. But for Officer James Mitchell, these were just stories. Until one night, a call from dispatch led him to the old church, where he would come face to face with the true horror that lingered within its walls. It was a cold, foggy evening when Officer Mitchell received the call. The air was thick with anticipation as the dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio.
"Officer Mitchell, we've received multiple reports of strange noises and lights at St. Mary's Church.
Can you check it out?" James sighed. He had driven past the church countless times, always dismissing the eerie stories as local folklore. But duty called.
"Copy that, dispatch. I'm on my way," he responded, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at his stomach. The drive to the church was unsettling. The fog seemed to swallow the light from his patrol car's headlights, and the ancient trees lining the road cast ominous shadows. As he approached the church, its towering spires loomed out of the mist, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. James parked his car at the edge of the churchyard and stepped out, his breath visible in the cold night air. The church's heavy wooden doors creaked open as he pushed them, revealing a dark and musty interior. He switched on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the thick gloom. "Hello? This is Officer Mitchell. Is anyone here?" His voice echoed through the cavernous space, the silence that followed amplifying his apprehension. The interior of St. Mary's was a haunting sight. The pews were coated in dust, and the once vibrant stained glass windows were cracked and dirty. As he moved further into the church, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. In the middle of the nave, he found an old Bible lying open on the floor. It was turned to a page in the book of Revelation, a passage about the end times. He picked it up, feeling a sudden surge of dread. A sudden noise broke the silence, a soft, haunting melody. James turned towards the source, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The music was coming from the organ, but the keys were playing by themselves. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice wavering. As he neared the organ, the music stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, he heard it, a whisper, so faint he almost missed it. "Leave this place." James spun around, his flashlight beam dancing wildly across the walls. There was no one there. The whisper came again, this time louder and more insistent. "Leave now, while you still can." He swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves. He had faced down criminals and danger many times before, but this was different. This was something he couldn't explain or fight. Determined to understand what was happening, James decided to search the church for clues. In the vestry, he found a stack of old newspapers and documents. As he sifted through them, a chilling story began to unfold. St. Mary's Church had a dark history. In the early 1900s, the town's priest, Father Thomas, had been accused of conducting forbidden rituals and consorting with dark forces. The townspeople had turned against him, and in a frenzy of fear and anger, they had executed him in the church. His final words were a curse on all who dared to enter the sacred ground. As James read the accounts, he felt a cold hand of fear grip his heart. He realized that the restless spirit of Father Thomas was still haunting the church, seeking vengeance. Just as he finished reading, the temperature in the room plummeted. His breath fogged in the air, and he felt an oppressive presence behind him. Slowly, he turned around. Standing there, shrouded in darkness, was the ghostly figure of Father Thomas. His eyes burned with an unholy fire, and his twisted expression was one of pure malevolence. "Why have you come here?" the ghostly priest demanded, his voice echoing with a supernatural resonance. James took a step back, his mind racing. He had to think fast. "I'm here to help. I want to understand what happened to you," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. The spirit of Father Thomas glared at him, but the fire in his eyes dimmed slightly. "Help? How can you help me? I am beyond redemption." "Maybe not," James replied. "Maybe there's a way to put your soul to rest." "Tell me what you need." The ghostly priest hesitated, then began to speak. He told James of the ritual he had attempted, one that had gone horribly wrong and damned him for eternity. To break the curse, the ritual needed to be completed correctly,
using a special incantation found in an ancient tome hidden somewhere in the church. James listened intently, his fear now mingled with determination. He had to find the book and finish the ritual, not only to free the spirit but to rid the church of its haunting presence. He searched the church from top to bottom, finally finding the ancient tome hidden behind a loose brick in the altar. The book was old and tattered, its pages filled with strange symbols and incantations. With the ghostly priest guiding him, James set up the ritual in the nave. He lit candles and drew the symbols on the floor, his hands trembling with both fear and anticipation. "Now, read the incantation," Father Thomas instructed, his voice now calmer, almost pleading. James began to read the strange words, his voice echoing through the empty church. As he spoke, a powerful energy filled the room, and the ghostly figure of Father Thomas began to fade. The candles flickered and the air crackled with electricity as James completed the incantation. The oppressive presence that had filled the church began to lift, replaced by a sense of peace. "Thank you," Father Thomas whispered, his form now barely visible. "You have freed me." With those final words, the spirit vanished, leaving James alone in the quiet, dimly lit church. He felt a wave of relief wash over him, knowing that the haunting was finally over. In the days that followed, word spread through Millfield of Officer Mitchell's brave encounter at St. Mary's Church. The townsfolk were grateful, and the church, once a place of fear, began to regain its former tranquility. James never spoke much about that night, but he carried the memory with him always. He knew he had faced something beyond the natural world, and he had come out victorious. But more importantly, he had helped a lost soul find peace. St. Mary's Church still stood as a testament to the past, but now, it was a place of reflection and serenity rather than fear. And for Officer James Mitchell, it was a reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead, and the courage it takes to face the unknown. The stretch of Highway 22 that runs through the heart of rural Tennessee is known for its scenic beauty, winding through dense forests and rolling hills. But for the officers of the local sheriff's department, it is also known for something far more sinister. A dark legend that has haunted their ranks for generations. Officer Jake Harrison had heard the stories, but like many, he dismissed them as nothing more than campfire tales. That is, until the night he experienced the highway's true horror firsthand. It was a cold, moonless night in October, and Officer Harrison was patrolling Highway 22 alone. The shift had been uneventful so far, with only the occasional speeding driver breaking the monotony. Jake was a seasoned officer, well acquainted with the quirks and rhythms of the night shift, but this night felt different. The air was thick with an oppressive stillness, and a sense of unease gnawed at him. As he cruised down the deserted highway, his radio crackled to life. "Unit 34. We've got a report of an abandoned vehicle near mile marker 66. "Check it out," the dispatcher said. "Roger that, dispatch." "On my way," Jake replied, turning his car towards the location. As he approached the mile marker, he spotted the vehicle, an old, beat-up sedan, parked haphazardly on the shoulder. Jake pulled over and approached the car, flashlight in hand. The vehicle was empty, the driver's door slightly ajar. A chill ran down his spine as he peered inside. The interior was in disarray, with personal belongings scattered across the seats and floor. There were no signs of a struggle, but something about the scene felt off. He radioed in his findings. "Dispatch, this is Unit 34. The vehicle is abandoned. No sign of the driver or any passengers. Requesting a tow truck." "Copy that, Unit 34. Tow truck is en route," the dispatcher replied. Jake decided to take a look around, hoping to find some clue as to what had happened. He scanned the area with his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. As he walked towards the edge of the woods, he noticed something strange, footprints leading into the forest. Against his better judgment, Jake followed the footprints. The path was narrow and overgrown, the trees looming ominously overhead. The deeper he went, the more the sense of dread grew. It felt as though the forest itself was watching him, the silence pressing in from all sides. After what felt like an eternity, Jake stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an old, dilapidated cabin, its windows dark and empty. He approached cautiously, his flashlight flickering as if sensing his fear. The door creaked open with a gentle push, revealing an interior that seemed frozen in time.
Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with dust.
Jake's flashlight revealed old furniture, decaying and covered in grime. But what caught his attention was a series of photographs pinned to the wall. They were all of people, men, women, and children, posing in front of the same sedan he'd found on the highway. His heart pounded as he realized the dates on the photos spanned decades. Suddenly, the radio crackled with static, breaking the silence.
"Unit 34, do you copy?"
"Unit 34? The voice was faint and distorted, but Jake could make out the urgency.
"Dispatch, this is Unit 34. I'm in an abandoned cabin off the highway. I found something strange," Jake reported, his voice shaking.
"Unit 34, get out of there.
"There's something you need to know."
That area." The radio went dead, leaving Jake in silence once more. Just as he turned to leave, he heard a whisper, barely audible. "Help me." The voice was coming from the back of the cabin. Against his instincts, Jake followed the sound, his flashlight trembling in his hand. He reached a small, dimly lit room. In the corner, a figure sat huddled, shrouded in shadows. It was a young woman, her clothes tattered and her eyes wide with terror.
"Please, help me," she whispered again.
Jake rushed to her side. "I'm here to help."
"What's your name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm.
"Sarah," she replied, her voice barely a whisper.
"He took me. He's coming back. We need to leave now."
Jake helped Sarah to her feet, and they hurried out of the cabin. The forest seemed even more menacing on their way back, every snap of a twig making Jake's heart race. They reached the highway just as the tow truck arrived. The driver looked at them with wide eyes, clearly startled by their appearance. "Get her to safety," Jake ordered.
"I'll follow you back to the station."
As they drove away, Jake's radio crackled to life again. "Unit 34, come in.
We have new information on that area. There have been multiple disappearances over the years. Be careful." "Too late for that," Jake muttered to himself, glancing in his rearview mirror.
The dark forest loomed behind them, and for a brief moment, he thought he saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the trees. Back at the station, Sarah recounted her ordeal.
She had been driving along Highway 22 when her car broke down.
A man had offered to help, but instead, he had taken her to the cabin. She didn't remember much after that, only flashes of fear and darkness. Jake and his colleagues launched an investigation, combing through old case files and records. They discovered a pattern of disappearances, all centered around the same stretch of highway and spanning several decades. Each case involved an abandoned car and no trace of the driver or passengers. The cabin, they learned, had once belonged to a man named William Greaves, a reclusive figure rumored to be involved in dark rituals. He had vanished without a trace years ago, but the disappearances continued, leading to whispers of a vengeful spirit haunting the highway. Determined to put an end to the terror, Jake decided to confront whatever was haunting the highway. He gathered a team of officers and returned to the cabin, armed with flashlights and the knowledge of what they were up against. As they approached the cabin, the air grew colder, and the sense of dread returned. They entered cautiously, the beams of their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The photographs on the wall seemed to watch them, and the floor creaked under their weight. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It was William Greaves, or what remained of him. His form was twisted and ghostly, a manifestation of years of anger and torment.
"You should not have come here," Greaves hissed, his voice echoing through the cabin.
"We're here to end this," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him.
"Your reign of terror ends tonight." The room seemed to tremble as the officers stood their ground.
Greaves advanced, his form shifting and flickering. Jake remembered the old tales of how spirits could be banished, by confronting them with the truth of their actions.
"You've caused enough pain," Jake said firmly.
"It's time for you to move on." With those words, the air grew still. Greaves' form wavered, and he let out a piercing scream. The cabin shook, and the photographs on the wall burst into flames. The officers watched in awe as Greaves' form dissolved into the air, leaving behind an eerie silence. The disappearances along Highway 22 ceased after that night. The cabin was demolished, and the land was left to nature. Jake and his fellow officers returned to their duties, but the memory of that night remained etched in their minds. For Jake, it was a sobering reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. He continued to patrol the highway, but with a newfound respect for the legends and stories that had once seemed so implausible. And as for the old lecture hall at Willowbrook University, it stood as a testament to the enduring power of the past, a reminder that some mysteries are best left undisturbed. The students and faculty carried on with their lives, always mindful of the shadows that lurked just beyond the edge of understanding. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more horror stories.
Share your thoughts and any spine-tingling experiences you've had in the comments below.
Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and stay curious.
Check out these other videos for more scary stories and paranormal investigations. Subscribe for more content, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.